hard looking. As I went into the saloon, I seen the four Richardson boys, and they was surrounded by a gang of cutthroats and outlaws. They was a Mexican there too, a tall, slim cuss with a thin black mustache and gilt braid onto his jacket. "So you think you settled in Bowie Knife Canyon, eh?" he says. And one of the boys said, "Well, that's what we was aiming to do." "I think not," he said, grinning like a cougar, and I seen his hands steal to the ivory-handled guns at his hips. "You never heard of Señor Gonzales Zamora? No? Well, he is a big hombre in this country, and he has use for this canyon in his business." "Start the fireworks whenever you're ready, Gomez," muttered a white desperado. "We're backing your play." The Richardson boys didn't know what the deal was about, but they seen they was up agin real trouble, and they turned pale and looked around like trapped critters, seeing nothing but hostile faces and hands gripping guns. "Who tell you you could settle this canyon?" asked Gomez. "Who bring you here? Somebody from Kansas? Yes? No?" "No," I said, shouldering my way through the crowd. "My folks come from Texas. My granddaddy was at San Jacinto. You remember that?" His hands fell away from his guns, and his brown hide turned ashy. The rest of them renegades give back, muttering, "Look out, boys. It's Breckenridge Elkins." They all suddenly found they had business at the bar, or playing cards, or something, and Gomez found himself standing alone. He licked his lips and looked sick, but he tried to keep up his bluff. "You maybe no like what I say about Señor Zamora," says he, "but it's truth. If I tell him gringos come to Bowie Knife Canyon, he get very mad." "Well, suppose you go and tell him now," I said, and so as to give him a good start, I picked him up and throwed him through the nearest winder. He picked himself up and staggered away, streaming blood and Mex profanity, and them in the saloon maintained a kind of pallid silence. I hitched my guns forward and said to the escaped convict which was tending bar, I says, "You don't want me to pay for that winder, do you?" "Oh, no," says he, polishing away with his rag at a spittoon he must have thought was a beer mug. "Oh, no, 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 no. We needed that winder busted for the ventilation." "Then everybody's satisfied," I suggested, and all the hoss thieves and stagecoach bandits in the saloon give me a hearty agreement. "Well, that's fine," I says. "Peace is what I aim to have, if I have to lick every one in the joint to get it. You boys get back to the camp." They was glad to do so, but I lingered at the bar and bought a drink for a train robber I'd knowed at Chawed Ear onct, and I said, "Just who is this cussed Zamora that Mex was spieling about?" "I don't know," says he. "I never heard of him before." "I wouldn't say you was lying," I said tolerantly. "You're just suffering from loss of memory. Frequently cases like that is cured and their memory is restored by a severe shock or jolt, like a lick onto the head. Now then, if I was to take my 6-shooter butt and drive your head through that whiskey barrel with it, I bet it'd restore your memory right sudden. Hold on," says he in a hurry. "I just remembered that Zamora is the boss of a gang of Mexicans which claims Bowie Knife Canyon. He deals in hosses." "You mean he steals hosses," I says. And he says, "I ain't arguing. Anyway, the cabin is very convenient for his business, and if you dump them immigrants in his front yard, he'll be very much put out." "He sure will," I agreed, "as quick as I can get my hands onto him." I finished my drink and strode to the door and turned suddenly with a gun in each hand. The 9 or 10 fellers which had drawed their guns aiming to shoot me in the back as I went through the door, they dropped their weapons and throwed up their hands and yelled, "Don't shoot!" So I just shot the lights out, then went out and got on to Captain Kidd whilst them idiots was hollering and falling over each other in the dark, and rode out of War Smoke, casually shattering a few winder lights along the street as I went. When I got back to camp the boys had already got there, and the whole wagon train was holding their weapons and scared most to death. "I'm mighty relieved to see you back safe, Mr. Elkins," says old man Richardson. "We heard the shooting and was afeared them bullies had kilt you. Let's hitch up and pull out right now. Them tenderfoots is beyond my comprehension. They'd have all pulled out in the dark if I'd let 'em, and I believe most of 'em stayed awake all night, expecting to be butchered in their sleep. I didn't say nothing to them about Zamora. The boys hadn't understood what Gomez was talking about, and they weren't no use getting 'em worse scared than what they generally was. Well, we pulled out before daylight because I aimed to reach the canyon without another stop. We kept rolling and got there pretty late that night. It weren't really no canyon at all, but a whopping big valley, well timbered and mighty good water and grass. It was a perfect place for a settlement, as I pinted out, but tenderfoots is powerful peculiar. I happened to pick our campsite that night on the spot where the Apaches wiped out a mule train of Mexicans 6 years before, and it was too dark to see the bones scattered around till next morning. Old man Richardson was using what he thought was a round rock for a pillar, and when he woke up the next morning and found he'd been sleeping with his head onto a human skull, he like to throwed a fit. And when I wanted to stop for the noonday meal in that there grove where the settlers hanged them 7 cattle rustlers 3 years before, them folks got the willies when they seen some of the ropes still sticking onto the limbs, and wouldn't on no account eat their dinner there. You got no idea what peculiar folks them immigrants is till you saw some. Well, we stopped a few miles further on in another grove in the midst of a wide rolling country of plenty of trees and tall grass, and I didn't tell 'em that was where them outlaws murdered the 3 Grissom boys in their sleep. Old man Richardson said it looked like as good a place as any to locate the settlement, but I told him we was going to look over the whole dern valley before we chose the spot. He kind of wilted and said at least for God's sake let 'em rest a few days. I never seen folks which tired out so easy, but I said all right, and we camped there that night. I hadn't saw no signs of Zamora's gang since we come into the valley, and thought likely they was all off stealing hosses somewhere. Not that it made any difference. Early next morning, Ned and Joe, the old man's boys, they wanted to go look for deer, and I told them not to go more than a mile from camp and be careful, and they said they would and sought out to the south. I went back of the camp a mile or two to the creek where Jim Dornley ambushed Tom Harrigan 4 years before and taken me a swim. I stayed longer than I intended to. It was such a relief to get away from them helpless tenderfoots for a while, and when I rode back into camp I seen Ned approaching with a stranger, a young white man, which carried himself with an air of great importance. "Hey, Pap," hollered young Ned as we dismounted. "Where's Mr. Elkins? This feller says we can't stay in Bowie Knife Canyon." "Who are you?" I demanded, emerging from behind a wagon, and the stranger's eyes bugged out as he seen me. "My name's George Warren," says he. "A wagon train of us just came into the valley from the east yesterday. We're from Illinois." "And by what right does you order people out of this canyon?" I asked. "We got the fightin'est man in the world guiding us," says he. "I thought he was the biggest man in the world till I seen you. But he ain't to be fooled with. When he heard they was another train in the valley, he sent me to tell you to git. You better, too, if you got any sense." "We don't want no trouble," quavered old man Richardson. "You got a nerve!" I snorted, and I pulled George Warren's hat down so the brim came off and hung around his neck like a collar, and turned him around and lifted him off the ground with a boot in the pants, then throwed him bodily onto his hoss. "Go back and tell your champeen that Bowie Knife Canyon belongs to us," I roared, slinging a few bullets around his hoss's feet, "and we gives him 1 hour to hitch up and clear out." "I'll get even for this," wept George Warren as he streaked it for his home range. "You'll be sorry, you big polecat. Just wait till I tell Mister—" I couldn't catch what else he said. "Now I bet he's mad," says old man Richardson. "We better go, after all." "Shut up!" I roared. "This here valley's ourn, and I intends to defend our rights to it to the last drop of your blood. Hitch them mules and swing the wagons in a circle. Pile your saddles and plunder betwixt the wheels. I got a idee you all fights better behind breastworks. Did you see their camp, Ned?" "No," says he, "but George Warren says it lies about 3 miles east of Iron. Me and Joe got separated, and I was swinging east round the south end of that ridge over there when I met this George Warren. He said he was out